Hey everyone, Cody from Mac Telecom Networks. In this video, we're going to be doing a Unifi 2021 Best Home Network. So I'll show you guys what I use in my home office. We're going to go through configuration from start to finish. So if you guys have seen some of my small business videos, it will be in that same setting, but then we're going to add how to set up Unifi Protect, and we're going to go into some more security details. This video is going to be pretty long as I'm resetting my whole network. I'll be putting timestamps in so you guys could skip ahead if you need to. If you guys are new here, please hit the subscribe button. Make sure to hit the bell icon. If you'd like to hire me for network consulting, visit www.mactelecomnetworks.com. You can find us on Instagram at Mac Telecom Network. And if you'd like to support the channel, we have an Amazon store and I'll put the link in the description below. To start off, let's go over the gear that I'm using and I'll explain a little bit about each piece. So the first one we're going to be using is the Unifi Dream Machine Pro. This would be the best router from Unifi if you're going to be using a Unifi router, as it's powered by a fast 1.7 gigahertz quad-core processor. The UDM Pro is a 1U rack-mountable appliance. It's run with the Unifi OS, which includes the Unifi Network Controller, Unifi Protect, Unifi Access, and Unifi Talk. We're not going to be going over Unifi Access or Unifi Talk in this video. I will leave a link in the description to a Unifi Access video that I've already done. The UDM Pro, like I said, acts as your video surveillance station if you're going to be using it for that. I use a UNVR, so we'll talk a little bit about that a little later on. It has enterprise IDS and IPS, also has deep packet inspection, Wi-Fi AI capabilities. The UDM Pro is $379 MSRP US. The next thing we're going to talk about is the Unifi Switch Pro 24 PoE. This is a 24 port switch with 16 ports that are 802.3 AT PoE+, 8 ports that are 802.3 BT PoE++, and it has two 10 gigabit SFP+ ports. The switch has layer 2 and layer 3 features, has a 400 watt maximum power. It has the Unifi Smart Power RPS DC input, near silent cooling, a 1.3 inch touchscreen, and it does feature that augmented reality if you guys want to look at that on through your Unifi app. The next switch we're going to be talking about is the Unifi Switch Lite 16 PoE. This is a layer 2 switch with 16 gigabit ports. 8 of the ports are 802.3 AT PoE+, and it has a total combined wattage of 45 watts for PoE. And the last switch we're going to talk about is the Unifi Switch Aggregation. You most likely don't need this in your home, but I have all my other switches linked up to this aggregation switch. So this switch is an 8-port 10 gigabit layer 2 switch. It has a switching capacity of 160 gigabits per second, a 1.3 inch touchscreen with the augmented reality. It's fanless with a 4.7 inch depth compact enclosure. It's also a 1U rack mount. Now that we've gone through all the switches that I use in my network, let's move over to the access points. So the first access point up is the Unifi 6 Lite access point. This is the first Wi-Fi 6 access point by Ubiquiti. They do have a Unifi 6 LR coming out, but it still is saying it's for pre-order. Features of this Wi-Fi 6 access point: it's 2x2 high efficiency Wi-Fi 6, 5 gigahertz band 2x2 multi-user MIMO with a radio rate of 1.2 gigabits per second. On the 2.4 gigahertz band, we have 2x2 MIMO with a radio rate of 300 megabits per second. It has a gigabit Ethernet port and is powered with 802.AF PoE. And this access point is compatible with the Nano HD covers if you want to put a different cover onto your access point. The next access point I use, which is located in my living room, is the Unifi In-Wall HD. This is an 802.11 AC 4x4 MIMO access point with 4 gigabit ports built into the bottom of the access point. It has one port that is a PoE pass-through, and to power up this access point you need 802.AF for the base functionality and 802.3 AT if you want to use the pass-through port. The next access point I use is the Unifi AP-AC Pro, and I love this access point. This is one of my favorite access points, and I've deployed hundreds of them in the field. It has a simultaneous dual band 3x3 MIMO. On the 5 gigahertz band, we have speeds up to 1300 megabits per second. On the 2.4 gigahertz band, we have speeds up to 450 megabits per second. It has a range up to 400 feet. and is powered by 802.3 AF PoE or 802.3 AT PoE+. It also has a secondary Ethernet port on the back. And the last access point I use in my house is the Unifi Lite access point. This is just a small access point to cover an area in my house that doesn't get the best coverage. It's capable of speeds up to 1,167 megabits per second, with a range up to 122 meters. Now we're done with the access points, let's move on to the cameras. So the first camera that we're going to look at is the Unifi Protect G4 Pro camera. This is a 4K video camera powered with a 3x optical zoom lens. It's IP67 supported, and it has a wide angle IR LED for night vision. I love this camera, it's great, it's a little pricey, but it is well worth the money. Next camera I have is the G4 Bullet camera. This is a 4 megapixel camera with 24 frames per second. You could actually bump past that if you enable HDR, which we will do when we set up our Protect system. You could use this camera for day or night as it has infrared LEDs built into it. It has a weatherproof enclosure, built-in microphone, and it's powered by PoE. I also have 3 Unifi Protect G3 Flex cameras on my house, and I love these cameras. They're 1080p cameras with up to 25 frames per second. They do day or night with infrared LEDs. They're weather resistant, they have a built-in microphone, and they're powered by 802.3 AF PoE. And the last camera in my network is the G4 Doorbell. This is a 2 megapixel doorbell camera with night vision. It has enhanced entrance light, so it will show a little light on the bottom of the doorbell if it's dark outside. It has real-time 2-way audio with echo cancellation. It has a built-in display which you could make it say whatever you want. Mine just says leave delivery at the door. This is a Wi-Fi enabled camera. It's weather resistant, and we manage this in our Unifi Protect controller. With all the equipment we've talked about so far, you could use your Unifi network controller and you could use Unifi Protect. I do have a UNVR, however, so let's take a look at some of the specs on that. So this is the Unifi Protect network video recorder. It has 4 drive bays, one 10 gigabit SFP plus port, a 1 gigabit RJ45 port. It's one U rack mountable, and it automatically configures for you either RAID 1 or RAID 5 depending the amount of disks that you have in it. And it supports the USPS RPS for power failover. And the last thing that you guys might need, you may want to buy some Unifi direct attached copper cables. You don't need to buy them directly from Unifi. You could get other DAC cables. These are SFP plus 10 gigabit cables. All right, so let's go over the cost. So everything that we've talked about minus the UNVR is in here, as this scenario would be using the UDM Pro to do our Protect, and I have added an 8 terabyte hard drive. So the total would be $3,354 US MSRP. If we weren't going to use the UDM Pro for our Protect, we were going to use the UNVR. The total would be $4,223 USD MSRP, and this would be fully loaded. All the bays would be loaded with 4 8 terabyte hard drives. Now that we've looked at all the equipment, let's look over my network diagram of how everything connects together. All right, so first up, we have our ISP connection going into the WAN port of the UDM Pro. I'm not using any of the 8 ports on the UDM Pro as it has a 1 gigabit backplane. What that means is all 8 ports are sharing only 1 gigabit. After the UDM Pro, we're using a DAC cable, a 10 gigabit SFP plus DAC cable to connect to our USW aggregation switch. From there, I have a fiber cable, an LC to LC fiber cable, and a DAC cable going from my USW aggregation switch to my USW PoE Pro switch. And these 2 links are in a link aggregation. Then we have my USW Lite 16, and it's connected with a copper Ethernet cable. And on the USW aggregation switch, we have a copper SFP plugged into it. My UNVR is connected with an LC to LC fiber optic cable. And down on my USW 24 PoE Pro, we have our in-wall HD, our Unifi 6 Lite access point, our AP-AC Lite, and our AP-AC Pro. We also have all our cameras plugging into that. So now we need to go ahead and go through the initial configuration to get our UDM Pro up, and then we'll work on the Protect later on in the video. Okay, so now this computer is directly plugged into my UDM Pro. We need to find out which subnet the UDM Pro is on. It should be on 192.168.1.1/24, but we could find out by going to command prompt and then typing in ipconfig. And if we scroll up to our adapter, we can see that it's given us 192.168.1.229. So to get to the UDM Pro, we'll just type that in, 192.168.1.1, and then we'll press enter. And now it's bringing us to the UDM Pro page. So this is going to say, name your UDM Pro. I'm going to call it Mac Telecom, UDMP. I'm going to agree to the terms and services for the end user license agreement and press next. So here, this is where there has been a lot of fuss online about. Unifi is making us do single sign-on to be able to set up the UDM Pro. I believe after you could create a local account and then delete the single sign-on, but we'll have to wait and see. So I already have an account with Unifi, so I'm going to type in my credentials. If you don't, you could go to create an account, and that will bring you to UI.com. Type in my credentials, then press next. So here, this is an update schedule. This is for new firmware updates. It's asking you how you want this to be pushed out, if you want it to be daily, if you want it to be weekly, or if you want it to be disabled. I myself disable all the automatic updates, as I like to know what is in the firmware and if it is causing anybody issues before deploying it. So I'm going to select disabled and press next. We could leave auto optimize on and send diagnostic and performance information. I'm going to leave that unchecked and I'll press next. Now it's starting a speed test. All right, my results were 933 megabits per second down and 911 up, and that is pretty close. I pay for a gig both ways. It says to adjust your speed to what your ISP has promised you, and I'm just going to put 1024 as that's a gigabit per second, and I'll press next. And now it's just asking us to review all our information, and then we'll press finish. Okay, now we're at the UDM Pro dashboard page. It's asking us how would you rate this machine. We're just going to exit out of that. And right now you can see all the controllers that are on my UDM Pro. So we have our network controller, protect, access, and talk. And up in the right-hand corner, it's asking me if I want to add all my camera devices. We aren't using the UDM Pro as our protect controller. That will be done on our UNVR. So we're going to go in and disable the protect as well as the talk. So to do that, we're going to go to settings. We're going to go to applications, and then I'm going to go to stop protect, and then we're going to stop talk. I'm going to leave access going as I do have the Unifi Access starter kit, and I will do other videos about that in the future. If you ever want to restart the controller, you just need to click back onto the applications and then press start protect or start talk. If you need to enable SSH on your UDM Pro, this is where we would do it. We would click on advanced, and then we would click on the toggle switch for SSH. And this is going to prompt us to create a SSH password. So just to show you guys, I'll put in test1234 and then test1234, and we'll press confirm. We'll go into a PuTTY session and we'll type 192.168.1.1. Log in as will be root, and the password will be test1234. And you can see that we're into the UDM Pro. That's how you enable SSH if you need to manually push firmware updates to it. I advise switching this off every time you are done using it. So I'm going to turn it off. Another important thing that you're going to want to do under the release channel, you want to make sure that it's set to official. You don't want to have it release candidate or beta, as there is still bugs in some of those firmware updates. Now let's go back to the dashboard and see if we could use a local account instead of our single sign-on. So I'm going to go to the top left corner. I'm going to go to user management, and then we're going to add a user. So we'll add it as an admin because we want this local account to be able to do anything it wants, all the configurations that we need. So I'll add admin. Employee ID, I'll just call it Cody. The role I am going to have as a super admin. The account type will be local access. So we'll type in my information, Cody McCallum, and then my local username, I'll just put as Mac Telecom. And then we're going to create a local password, which you're going to want to make sure that it is a strong password. And then we'll press add. And unfortunately, it seems that you still can't delete the single sign-on user. If we go to edit and switch this account to try to deactivate it, it won't let us. If we go to our local account, we could make it deactivated. So unfortunately, you're still going to have to use the single sign-on. Now let's go back to the top left corner and then get into our network configuration. So this is using the new Unifi controller 6.0.43. We're going to do all our configuration in the classic mode so that it doesn't look different for anybody else. This video was shot in January 2021. This is the dashboard to our Unifi network controller. We could see our UDM Pro. We could see the internet provider up at the top. It's going to show us real-time usage for our download and our upload speed. It will show us our clients that are connected. It's saying we have 1 Windows and 11 other. And then down here, it's saying elevate your Wi-Fi experience with Unifi APs. The first thing I'm going to do with my UDM Pro, I'm going to switch the subnet that is default. So right now it's sitting at 192.168.1.1/24. We're going to switch that to 192.168.10.1/24. So how we do that, we go to settings. And I'm going to switch to classic settings, and then we'll go to network. And then here we can see that the subnet is 192.168.1.0/24. We're going to edit this. We're going to switch that to 10.1, and then we're going to update the DHCP range and then press save. This will end up booting us out, and we'll have to go to 192.168.10.1 to access our UDM Pro. So on my computer, I had to do an ipconfig/release and then an ipconfig to get a new IP address out of the new subnet 192.168.10.87. So now if we go back to the UDM Pro at 192.168.10.1, we can see it showing up here. And your connection is not private. We're going to press advanced and then proceed. Now we're going to log back on with our single sign-on or that local account that you created. And then we're going to go back into our network controller. Now that we're back at our network controller, the first thing we need to do is to adopt all our Unifi network devices. So we're going to go over to the left and then click on devices. Here we're going to see all our Unifi devices that need to be adopted. So we'll click on each one and then we'll select adopt. Now all our network devices have provisioned and they are up and running in our network controller. I'm going to assign these all static IPs. So the first thing I'm going to want to do, I'm going to want to make my DHCP reservation a little bit bigger. So I'm going to go to settings. We're going to go to networks. I'm going to go to my LAN corporate network and press edit. And then under DHCP range, right now it says 192.168.10.6 to 254. We're going to put that up to 50 and then press save. Now I'm going to manually go into each one of my devices and set a static IP address. The first one we'll set is our Unifi switch aggregation. So I'll click on the device. We'll go to configure, scroll down to network. And then here it says configure IP, which it says using DHCP. We're going to give it a static IP. The static IP that we're going to give it is 192.168.10.2. The preferred DNS will be 1.1.1.1. The subnet mask will be a class C, so 255.255.255.0. Alternate DNS, I'll use 8.8.8.8. And then the gateway will be 192.168.10.1. And we'll press Q changes and then apply. And now we can see our Unifi switch aggregation has an IP of 192.168.10.2. And you may notice some of your devices will say heartbeat missed, but they are still online. And we can see that by just pinging the devices. And that's my U6 Lite, so it is still online. Now we'll move to our next switch, which will be our USW Pro 24. We'll go to the configuration wheel, go down to network, and then static IP. So this we're going to give an IP of 192.168.10.3. Preferred DNS 1.1.1.1, subnet mask 255.255.255.0, the alternate DNS of 8.8.8.8, and our gateway of 192.168.10.1, and then we'll queue changes and then apply. And we could see that our switch is now taken 192.168.10.3. The rest of these I'm going to speed through, but it is the exact same process. Now that all our devices have static IP set, we need to create some networks. So the networks that we're going to be creating is an admin management network, which is already done for us on the 192.168.10 network. The second network we're going to create is a guest called Mac Telecom Guest. 192.168.20.1/24. We're going to create an IoT network called MAC Telecom IoT on 192.168.30.1/24, and then we're going to create a camera network called MAC Telecom Camera at 192.168.40.1/24. So to create networks, we need to go to our settings, then go up to networks. Here we need to create a new network, and the first one that we're going to create is the MAC Telecom guest. I'm not going to create it under the guest purposes. That will auto create firewall rules for us. If you want to do it that way, that's fine. I'm going to create it as a corporate, and the name is going to be MAC Telecom guest. We're going to have this sitting on VLAN 20. The gateway and IP subnet will be 192.168.20.1/24. Here we're going to update the DHCP range and then press save. The next network we need to create is the MAC Telecom IoT network. It's going to be a corporate as well with VLAN tag of 30, and it will be IP subnet of 192.168.30.1/24. We'll update the DHCP range. Since this is our IoT network, we're going to enable IGMP snooping, and we'll press save. The last network we're going to create is our MAC Telecom camera network, which will be on VLAN 40, and it will have a subnet of 192.168.40.1/24. I'm going to update the DHCP range and press save. The things that will be on my management admin network will be all my network devices, this PC, and any other PC. For guests, that's pretty self-explanatory. That will be when I have a guest over. IoT will have things like my smart TVs, my smart lights, Chromecast, Fire Sticks, Sonos, and so on. And the MAC Telecom camera will have all my cameras, so my UNVR, as well as all the Unifi cameras. Next, we need to create some wireless networks. So I'll go up to wireless networks, and then we're going to create a new wireless network. I'm going to keep it with the same name, so it will be MAC Telecom guest. We're going to put in a password for this, so it will be WPA personal, and you want to make sure you set strong passwords. We're not going to apply guest policies. This would have a captive portal, guest authentication and access. That would be like a splash page, and we don't need that for our home. This network, this is where you will be specifying the VLAN that it will be going on. So we'll select a network, and it will be MAC Telecom guest. I'm going to limit the amount of bandwidth that my guests could upload and download, but for now, we're going to save this, create our other Wi-Fi networks, and then come back to that. So our next Wi-Fi network will be our MAC Telecom IoT, and then it will be WPA personal, and we'll put another strong password. So our network, we're going to select MAC Telecom IoT, and since this is our IoT network, we're going to want to scroll down, want to enable multicast enhancement, and then we'll press save. And our last Wi-Fi network that we're going to create is the MAC Telecom camera. And the reason I need to create this is the G4 doorbell requires that you have Wi-Fi connection. So we'll create another password, and then we're going to select the network of MAC Telecom camera and then press save. All right, so now to limit the bandwidth to your guests, we want to create a user group. So I'll go to user groups, and we're going to create a new user group. I'm going to call this guest network. And the bandwidth limit, I'm going to allow them to have 20 megabits per second download and 10 upload. And then we'll save. Now we need to go back to our guest wireless network, select edit, go to advanced, scroll down and go to the user group that we just created called guest network. Once we apply this, they will only be able to have 20 megabits per second download and 10 megabits per second upload. Another network that you may want to configure into your network is a remote user VPN. So to start that off, we need to enable our Radius server as well as creating an account. So we'll go to services. The first selection is Radius. We're going to go to server and we're going to enable that. We're going to want to put in a password, a secret password, which will be test1234, and then we're going to apply. You want to put a strong password in here. I'm just doing simple passwords for the purpose of this video. Next, we want to create a user, and you could create multiple users who will be able to use this VPN. So I'm going to create new user. I'll call it Cody. The password test1234. The tunnel type will be layer 2 tunneling protocol, and the tunnel medium will be IPv4, and we'll press save. Next, we need to go to our networks, create new network, and this will be a remote user VPN, and that's what I'll call it, remote VPN. The VPN type, they only have one selection, which is our L2TP server, and then our pre-shared key. We want to select which interface our internet connection is coming into, if it's WAN 1 or WAN 2, and then we need to select a subnet for the VPN connections. I'll select 192.168.100.1/24. Our radius profile that we're going to select is the default, so this will contain all our users, and then we're going to require MSChap version 2 and press save. I do have other videos on remote user VPNs. I'll put those in the description. There is another VPN type that you could create, which is site-to-site VPN. I won't be covering it in this video, but I'll leave it in the description. Now, coming back to my drawing, between our aggregation switch and our USW PoE Pro 24, we have a link aggregation between that. So we need to set that up on both switches. So I'll go to my device tab. I'll go to the Unifi switch aggregation, and we're going to go to ports. So where we need the link aggregation between, I have the connections on SFP+5 and SFP+6. So I'll select the edit pencil. We're going to go to profile overrides, and then we're going to select aggregate. So you could have up to 4 ports in a link aggregation. I only have 2, so it will be from port 5 to port 6. And then we're going to press apply. Now we need to do the same thing on our USW Pro 24. So we need to select our ports, go down to our SFP1 and SFP2, select the edit pencil, and then profile overrides. We're going to want to aggregate these, and then it will just auto select port 25 and 26, as those are the only 2 SFP Plus ports, and we'll press apply. Now both of the switches are done provisioning, so if we look at our USW Pro 24 PoE, we could see both of the SFP Plus are in an uplink and they're aggregated together. We could also look at our Unifi switch aggregation, and we could see port 4 and 5 are aggregated together. These 2 switches were plugged in with 2 uplinks together. Without an aggregation, you would see one of these ports in a blocking state due to spanning tree protocol. Now that we've created all of our networks, our wireless networks, and done all the aggregate links between our switches, we need to start setting our devices in the correct switch port profiles. So we're going to start off with my cameras. We could see that my Unifi NVR is on Unifi switch aggregation port 4. We need to get that set into the camera VLAN. And to do that, I'm going to click on the port, and it will bring up our Unifi switch aggregation. And we could see that it's connected to SFP Plus port 4. I'll select the edit pencil, and then under the switch port profile, this is where you're going to set the VLAN. So we'll click on the drop down menu, and then I'm going to select Mac Telecom camera, and then we'll press apply. We also need to do the same thing for all of our other cameras, because right now they're in the 192.168.10 network. So I'm going to go to each one of these cameras and put them in the Mac Telecom camera VLAN. So this one is on port 21. We'll select the edit pencil, go to switch port profile, and then we'll put it into the Mac Telecom camera and press apply. If for some reason after you wait about 5 minutes it doesn't grab a new IP address, you could always go to the port and then select this little reload button. This will power cycle the port. And I'll do one just so you guys can see. So are you sure you want to power cycle port 21? And we're going to confirm. Now I'm going to speed through this, but I'm going to do the exact same steps on the other cameras. So all of the cameras have taken the new subnet for the Mac Telecom cameras, but our UNVR is still stuck at 192.168.10.138. So what we could do, we could go to the port, we could go to the edit pencil, we could then disable the port and press apply. After we disable it, we could re-enable it with the Mac Telecom camera network and then press apply. Now after disabling and re-enabling the port, we could see that it's taken 192.168.40.138. So now in the second part, we're going to set up our UNVR. If you're using the UDM Pro as your protect, you're going to want to go to the top left corner and then select the protect controller. We can't see mine right now because I turned it off. If you're unable to see the protect controller, just go to settings, go to applications, and then start protect. So to get to my UNVR, we need to go to this IP address, 192.168.40.138. So I'll type that into a browser, 192.168.40.138, and then we'll press enter. We're going to go to advanced and then proceed. And now it brings up protect network video recorder. We're going to give it a device name. So it says UNVR. I'm just going to call it Mac Telecom NVR. And then I'm going to agree to the end user license and press next. Here you need to sign in again with your single sign-on or create an account. I already have an account, so I'm going to just log in that information. The next step is an update schedule. This is the same as our UDM Pro. This is for pushing firmware out. I'm not going to have that turned on as I check almost daily to see if there's new firmware. So I'm going to disable that and then press next. Step 4 is configuration. It says basic configuration for your device, send diagnostics and performance. I'm going to not select that and press next. And the last thing is just a review of our account and we'll press finish. Setting up our device, this may take several minutes. And as before, it's going to ask us how we rate our experience with the NVR. I'm not going to select anything right now and just click X. And now we could see our Unifi controller. If you're doing this through the UDM, you'll see the exact same icon. If we want to add other users, remote viewing, or just local access, we could go to the user management. And we could also take a look at some of the settings. So I'll go to settings. And under the settings, it's going to tell you your UNVR name, the owner, the uptime, the firmware version, and you could always check for new updates here. If we scroll down a little bit, it's going to show us our performance, so our CPU load, our CPU temperature, and our memory. We could see the hardware that's inside, our processor, the memory that's built in, and then it's going to show us our storage and capacity. So our internal storage, we have about 8 gigabits. Since I have all 4 bays filled up with 2 terabyte hard drives, it's automatically putting it in a RAID 5. If we just had 2 hard drives in there, it would put it in a RAID 1 configuration. There's no way to change this. It just automatically does it for you. And as we could see, all of our hard drives are healthy. If we want, we could erase and format the hard drives. And then we could set up client network information. Right now, I'm just going to leave it at DHCP. Under the applications, we could check for update for the Protect. And it's showing that this has an update to Protect 1.17.2, and I'll select that update. All right, now the Protect version 1.17.2 has upgraded to our UNVR. I'm going to show you a couple other things in the settings. So if we go to advanced, we could enable SSH, the same as the UDM Pro. So we'll hit the toggle switch, and then you need to put password. We'll just do test1234. Test 1234 and then confirm. Now if we want to access an SSH session to the UNVR, we could go to PuTTY and then type in 192.168.40.138, which is our UNVR, and then open. The username will be root and the password will be the password we just created of test 1234. And now we're into the command line of the UNVR. The reason I'm telling you guys this is sometimes the firmware updates don't push through and you could be sitting there for hours and it's saying updating. This way you could manually push out the update to it. So it's always good to know how to get to the command line interface. Like the UDM Pro, once we're done with the SSH session, we're going to turn it off by hitting the toggle switch. If you want to enable remote access by using the Protect app on your Android or iPhone, you're going to want to select the remote access toggle switch and turn it on. The release channel, I would suggest keeping this to official, but if you want to try out some of the beta firmware or release candidate, you could select them down there. We could do a restart, a power off, a factory reset, and if you need to send in some support files to Unifi, you could download the support file bundle. Now let's get into our Unifi Protect. So we'll click on the top left corner U, select the Protect controller, and now this is the Unifi Protect dashboard. It's saying you have no smart detections, you have no events. And that's because we don't have any cameras adopted yet. So we're going to want to go over and select devices. And then we're going to go to the top right corner and add devices. And here we can see I have 5 cameras up. The only one missing is our G4 doorbell, and we'll go through that in a little bit. So this camera is a G3 Flex. I'll just call it side of house. This G3 Flex is front door, which I need to adjust the camera angle down. The next G3 Flex is my garage. The G4 Bullet will be pointing towards the right side of driveway. And the G4 Pro is pointing towards the left side of my driveway. Now that we have all the names in, we could select Add Device. Now we could see the devices coming up online. I like to switch it to this view so I could see the cameras itself. And how you do that, you just select the 4 squares. And now we could see all my cameras that are online. A quick note, the only cameras that do smart person detection and smart vehicle detection are the G4 cameras. So any of the G3 series cameras don't have the ability to do that. So to enable our smart detections, we need to go back to the dashboard and then click here to enable smart detections, and then read the agreement and press I agree. Now that we have smart detection turned on, I'm going to go through setup of one of the cameras. So we'll set up my UVC G4 Pro camera. So I'll click on the camera. And right here, we could see a screenshot of the camera. It will show us the name of the camera, the camera status, which it's connected, the camera model, the firmware version the camera is running, the frames per second, the bit rate, the hostname, MAC address, the link state, which these G4 cameras run at 1 gigabit per second, the uptime, the connected time, and the last motion. If we go over to general, we could change the name of the camera, and these have microphones built in, so you could select the sensitivity. You could also disable the microphone if needed. Some states or provinces require no recording. You will want to check your local laws. You could turn on and off the status light. That is the blue ring that circles around the G4 Pro camera. We could adjust the camera picture, which will show us the microphone brightness, contrast, hue, saturation, sharpness, optical zoom. The G4 camera has a built-in 3x optical zoom. We could change the focus, the denoise, AE mode, orientation, infrared, and HDR. I'm going to leave everything at default as it looks pretty good. We could select overlay information. So if we want to have the time, have a timestamp directly onto the camera, we could select that on. The camera name, the Unifi logo, which I'm going to turn off, and the bitrate information. Then I'll press apply. Next, we could go to our recording. And right now it's set to always on, which I'm going to have it set for 24/7 recording. But if you want to change that, here are the following options. We could have this camera set to never record, have it set only on motion events, or smart detection. If we want to adjust our recording quality, this is where we'll do it. So by default, the G4 Pro cameras run at 24 frames per second, and it will have a 100% image quality, which is just adjusting the bitrate. And I'm going to leave the image quality at 100%. But the one thing I'm going to turn on is the high frame rate mode. This will give us more frames per second. And now, as you can see, after turning high frame rate mode on, we're getting 50 frames per second from the G4 Pro camera. If we want to change what happens when motion is detected, we will do this here. So you could set your minimum second of motion to trigger event, seconds to record before motion, and seconds to record after motion. We could also select our motion algorithm, which is just enhanced or stable. Next, we have smart detection, and this is where you're going to specify if you want smart detection for person detection and vehicle detection on. Right now, the vehicle detection is in beta, but I'm going to leave both the person and vehicle detection on. We could set up motion zones if we'd like, so we click on motion zone. By default, it covers the whole camera lens, and you can see that in the purple. If you wanted to select just your driveway, you could always drag the purple square down and then put it just onto your driveway. You could also add a new zone. So if you wanted it to cover your driveway as well as the side of your house, you can make this zone in a different position. Next, we could set up our smart detection zones and then add smart detection zone. Here by default, it selects two detection types, the person and the vehicle. For the default, I'm just going to have person, and I'm going to deselect the vehicle. Now I'm going to select the zone to just be on my front yard as well as my driveway. And then I'm going to add a new zone, which will just be a vehicle detection. So we'll have it on my front driveway, and we'll create one more zone to add new motion zone, and we'll do that for the road. Now, anytime that a vehicle is shown up on our camera, it will show up as a smart vehicle detection. And then I'm going to press save. And one last thing under here, you could select privacy zones. So privacy zones allow you to define specific areas that will never be recorded. And you could set this up if you want. I'm not going to set that up now. Under manage, we could reboot the camera. We could unmanage it completely, which will take it out of our Unifi Protect camera and set it to default. We could look at the RTSP streams, and we could disable the microphone if needed. The next thing we're going to look at is the live view. So this is the default live view, and it's showing all our cameras, but we could add a custom view. So we could go to add view, and then you could give it a live view name. I'll just call it Mac Telecom. And we're going to select 6 cameras. As I do have 6 cameras, the doorbell just isn't in there yet, and then we'll press next. Now we could select where we want these cameras to show up. So I'm going to have my left driveway as the main camera, and then we'll go right driveway, front door, side of house, and then garage. Once we get our G4 doorbell hooked up, we'll put it in the bottom right, and then we'll press save. Now we could see this custom view that we set up, and we could always edit the view to rearrange the cameras. Next is the events. So this will show us all recorded events, and if we want to look at our smart detections that will show over on this tab, we just have 2 vehicle detections. If you need to download footage, you could do it here, click the download, or you could do it under the events. We could also filter by camera if we only want to look at one specific camera, as well as the time range. The next thing we're going to look at is the time lapse. So this is the front door and this is the live view right now. We could scroll through on the right hand side and it will bring us to different footage at that time. You could also specify the date. We only have the one day as we just set this up this morning. If you wanted to download a specific time range, you could click the download button and then you could split to where you want the video to start and where you want it to end and then download the footage. Now we could look at roles, and by default there's administrators and then view only. We could select a new rule. We could give the rule a name. We could specify which cameras we want this role to be able to view. Then we have an activity log of events that happen to the cameras. So the top one, the side of the house, the camera reconnected, disconnected 10 seconds. Now if we go under settings, and this is the settings for the Protect controller, not the UNVR, we could look at the general settings. So the MAC address, the IP address, the Protect uptime, the Protect version, which also has a change log so you could see what changed in the firmware update. We could take a look at our backups. Right now I have it set daily backups are on. If we click on advanced, this will reveal the device password. So if you need to SSH into one of your cameras, this is the password that you'll be using. Also under actions, we could factory reset the Unifi Protect. Under recordings, we could set time-based purge. So time-based purge deletes footage from your hard drive once you've reached a maximum time limit. This can be required by laws in some areas. We could turn that on and we could set this to times before purge, and I'm going to set it to 30 days and then I'll press save. And the next thing will be my alerts. So we could enable activity alerts. Now we could set a name. I'm going to call it UNVR alerts. When to send, you could have it send to always or a custom schedule. So I'll say always. So now you decide which alerts you want. So for my UNVR, we could have it either an email notification or a push notification to our phone if it connects and disconnects, which I'll have. And then we could also select alerts based on camera. So any of our G3 cameras, we won't be able to have smart alerts, but any of the G4 cameras, we will be able to. So I'm going to have my left side driveway be able to push me out that alert. I'm going to have it connect and disconnect. We'll push an alert on that. And then I'm going to push alerts on all of the other ones for connect and disconnect, and then press save. And you could also create other custom activity alerts by selecting create activity alerts in the bottom right hand corner. Now to add our G4 doorbell, I'm connected with my phone to the Unifi Protect app. And as you can see, it says new device, and then we're going to press add. Okay, so I had to run downstairs to be a little closer to the doorbell so that the Bluetooth would connect. And I selected the wireless network of my Mac Telecom camera. So now it's asking to give a name. I'm just going to call it doorbell, and we'll press done. And now it's asking me, do you have a chime box? Which I do, and I'll install with chime box, and we'll press yes, install. And now it's asking us for enable notifications when the doorbell is pressed, and I'll say add alert. Now we can see on the bottom that our doorbell is in. Let's go ahead and then add that to our custom view. So I'll go to my live view, and then we're going to edit the view. And then now we're going to drag and drop the doorbell into the bottom right corner and then press save. And we could now see our doorbell camera in the bottom right hand corner. So that's the setup for Unifi Protect. The last thing that we need to do our network security. So we're going to go over some firewall rules as well as setting up the IDS and the IPS. Now we're going to go back to our UDM Pro and start configuring the firewall rules. So we'll want to go to our settings, routing and firewall, and then firewall. So the interfaces that we'll be putting rules under for this video will be the LAN in and the LAN local. Click on LAN in and create new rule. And the first rule is going to be to allow established and related. So we'll call it allowed established and related. And the action is going to be to accept. Protocols will be set to all. And under advanced, the states that we'll want to check off is established and related. And then we'll press save. The next thing we're going to want to do, we need to create a group. We'll create a new group and it will be called the RFC 1918. In the RFC 1918, it covers all of the private IP addresses. These are IP addresses that are non-routable on the internet. So the first subnet will be 192.168.0.0/16. The second one will be 172.16.0.0/12, and the third one will be 10.0.0.0/8. If you want to read up more on RFC 19, there is a white paper on it, which you just need to search up in Google. And then I'll press save. Then we're going to go back to rules IPv4. So by default, how Unifi has their system set up, it allows inter VLAN routing. So that means your IoT network could talk to your admin network, your guest network could talk to your admin network, the IoT could talk to guest, and so on. We don't want the IoT or the guest network to be able to have access to our admin network. And if we need our guests to have access to a device on our admin network, we could set up an allow rule. But we want to block all the inter VLAN routing. So the first rule we're going to set up, I'm going to go under LAN in, and we're going to create a new rule. This new rule will be to allow our main network to be able to talk to all VLANs. Allow main network to all VLANs. The action is going to be accept, and then the source network will be our LAN, and the destination will be that new IPv4 address group of RFC 1918. And then we'll press save. The next rule we're going to create is to block all inter VLAN routing. So we'll create a new rule, and that's what we'll call it. Block inter VLAN routing. The action is going to be to drop, and the source will be the group of the RFC 1918, and the destination will be the RFC 1918. And then we'll press save. All right, so now as it stands, our admin LAN could talk to everything, and then our other subnets can't talk to anything else. But they still could talk to the firewall interfaces. So if we went onto the IoT network, they could still hit their own firewall interface at 192.168.30.1. They could also hit the firewall interface of our admin network at 192.168.10.1. So how we do that, we need to create some rules under the LAN local. And we're going to create some groups. I'm going to create a new group. The group name is going to be to block guests to gateways. So in this group, we're going to add all the router interfaces except its own. So the guest has a firewall interface at 192.168.20.1. So we're going to add all the other ones except that. So the first will be 192.168.10.1, which is our admin. The second one will be 192.168.30.1, which is our IoT network. And the last one will be 192.168.40.1, which is our camera network, and then we'll press save. Now we have to do that same thing for the other subnets, so we'll create a new group. And this group is going to be block IoT to gateways. So the first one will be 192.168.10.1, then 192.168.20.1, which is the guest firewall interface. And then the last one will be 192.168.40.1, which is the camera firewall interface. Then we'll press save. And then the last group we need to create is block cameras from gateways. So it will be 192.168.10.1, which is the admin. Then 192.168.20.1, which is our guest. And then 192.168.30.1, which is our IoT network. And we'll press save. Now the groups are created, we need to create the rules. So we'll go back to rules IPv4, go to LAN local, and then we'll create new rules. And I'm going to give these rules the same name as the groups. So it will be block guests to gateways. The action will be to drop. The source will be a network of our guest. And then the destination will be the IPv4 address group of block guests to gateways. And then we'll press save. Now we have to do it for the other networks. So we'll create new rule. And we're going to block IoT to gateways. We're going to action to drop. The source is going to be the Mac Telecom IoT. And the destination will be the block IoT to gateways. And then we'll press save. And the last rule will be to block the cameras to the gateways. Action drop. The source network will be our Mac Telecom cameras, and the destination IPv4 address group will be the block cameras to gateways, and then we'll press save. Now our networks can't reach the other network's firewall interfaces, but they could still reach their own. So we need to be able to block that. And we can't just block the IP address. If we did that, they would have no internet access. So we need to block HTTP, HTTPS, and SSH. I'm sure there's a different way you could do this, probably a more refined way so that you have less rules, but this is just the way I do it. So I'm gonna go ahead and create a few more groups. So I'll create a new group, and the name I'm gonna give it is block guest to firewall interface. And then I'm gonna put in the IP address of the guest firewall interface. So it will be 192.168.20.1, and then I'll save. Now we need to make two more groups, and this one will be called block IoT, which will have an IP address of the IoT gateway, which is 192.168.30.1, and then I'll press save. And then the last one will be the cameras, which has a router interface of 192.168.40.1. Now we need to create a group with the HTTP, HTTPS, and SSH, and I'll go create new group, and we'll just call it HTTP, HTTPS, and SSH. And the type here is going to be port. So the first port we'll use is 80, and we'll add 8080 as well. So this is for HTTP, then we're going to add HTTPS, which is 443. And then we'll add SSH, which is port 22, and then we'll press save. Now the groups are created, we need to add the rule set. So we'll go to rules IPv4, local LAN, and then create new rule. And we'll give them the same name as the groups. So it will be block guest to firewall interface. The action will be to drop. The source will be a network of our Mac Telecom guest. The IPv4 group will be the block guest to firewall interface. And then we need to select that port group that we created of HTTP, HTTPS, and SSH, and we'll press save. Next, we need to block the IoT. So the source will be Mac Telecom IoT, and the destination will be the block IoT to firewall interface, and the port group HTTP, and press save. And the last rule will be the block the cameras, and we'll scroll down to the network, which will be the Mac Telecom camera. The IPv4 group will be the block camera to firewall interface, and the port group HTTP, and press save. So now everything is secure. Our IoT can't talk to anything except its own network in the internet, and same with the guest. But say we want our guest to access a device on our admin network. We're going to put in a allow rule. So I'm going to create a new rule, and I'm going to say allow guest to NAS. I would never do this. This is just for the purpose of this video. The action is going to be to accept. Source network is going to be the Mac Telecom guest. In the destination type, I'm just going to put the IP of my NAS, which is 192.168.10.56, and press save. As it stands right now, the guest still wouldn't be able to get to the Synology NAS. And the reason for that is firewall rules go in order, so from top down. And as you can see, block inner VLAN routing is above the allow guest to NAS. So what we need to do, we need to click and then drag and drop so the allow rule is above the block RFC 1918. And now our guest should be able to get to the Synology NAS. The next thing we're going to talk about involves security is creating switch port profiles. So if we go to our devices and then click on our US Pro 24, then hover over the ports, we could see that these at the bottom is all showing to the profile all, except the camera network that I manually switched myself. So if somebody were to come into your home or your business and plug in a switch right now, all these ports are trunking, which means all the VLANs would go to that switch. What we want to do, we want to create profiles so that we only allow the VLANs that we need to go to those ports, and the ports that we aren't using, we want to disable. So I'm going to create a switch port profile for my access points to only allow the 3 VLANs that we created for our wireless networks over them. And how we do that, we go to the settings, we click on profiles, and then switch port profiles. And we could see some profiles that were already made. Once you create a new network, it will automatically put a new profile in here. So we want to add new port profile. And I'm going to just call this AP profile. for our access point profile. The PoE, I'm just going to select do not modify. Our native network will be our LAN, and then we want to tag the other VLANs that we have created. So here we could just select all, and that's going to select all the VLANs we created. If you only wanted a specific VLAN to be on this profile, you could select whichever you want. And if you had a voice network, we could select the VLAN there as well. And then we're going to press save. Now we got to go back to our switch. So we'll go to devices and then our USW Pro 24. Then we need to find our access points and where they're plugged into. So here we can see the UAP in-wall HD, and we'll click the pencil icon. I'm going to name this Unifi HD. And then under switch port profile, we could go down to the custom profile, AP profile that we just created and press apply. Now that's only going to allow the VLAN 20, 30, and 40 to go across it. So now we have to find our other access points, which one of them is on port 15, which is my basement access point. So I'll call it basement. And then switch port profile will be AP profile, and press apply. Now we'll go to port 18, which is in my master. So I'll call it master, and then switch port profile of AP profile, and apply. And the last one is on port 20, and that is in my office right above me. So we'll call it office, and that's the U6 light. We'll put the profile and select it to AP profile. With these profiles, the same goes for your IoT network. If you have any TVs or anything IoT related plugged into your switch, you're going to want to put that into the correct VLAN by clicking the edit pencil and then selecting IoT and then pressing save. Another good security practice is to shut down all the ports that aren't being used. So as you can see, all these grayed out ports, they're not being used right now. So what we would want to do, click the pencil icon and then go to switch port profile and then disable and press apply. And the last thing we're going to talk about in this video is threat management. So Unifi has an IDS and an IPS system. So the IDS is an intrusion detection system. It will send out alerts if there is something malicious coming into your network. The IPS is an intrusion prevention system. So this will give you an alert, but it will block the connection as well. So how we go and turn that on, we're going to go to our settings wheel, and then we're going to go to threat management. Note that this is still in beta and it could be buggy. If you want to see an overview of what these do, you could hover over the information icon and it will tell you. I'm going to set mine to IPS because I want it to block the traffic. Your firewall restrictions, we have restrict access to Tor, which I'm going to leave on, and then we have restrict access to malicious IP addresses, which we'll leave on as well. Then they also have a bunch of different threat management categories, which you could find a list and a description of what they do on the help.ui.com, and I'll leave a link to this below. For now, I'll just leave the defaults on, and then we could go to threat management allow list. If we wanted to whitelist some websites or some IP addresses, we could put them in the allow list here, and then we'll press apply. Now we could go take a look at the threat management dashboard. We could go over to the left-hand side where it shows you the shield. This is the threat management. And from here, it's going to give you an overview. You can see the traffic log, endpoint scans, and honeypot. So on the overview, we could block out whole countries if we want. If we want to say block Brazil, we just click on it and then we block. So now Brazil is in the blocked countries. And then if we want to unblock them, we could just click the unblock and it will unblock them. If you have any threat management alerts, they will show up where this bell icon is under alerts, and it will tell you what is happening. Right now, I'm going to switch over to the try new settings beta because it adds a little bit more into the threat management that the classic doesn't. If we click on security and then go to internet threat management, you can see it looks a little bit different. So we have it turned on and we've selected intrusion prevention system. Under here, it has different sensitivity levels. So 1 being the lowest and then 5 being maximum. So if we put it to 5, it will block everything. Right now it's on 1, and you could see under customized threat management that 6 of 35 are turned on. If we go to 5, it will have 35 of 35. You could get a lot of alerts if you have all of them turned on. Say you have P2P turned on. If you do a Zoom call, you're going to get an alert. So one that's called VoIP. So if you have a VoIP system, you'll get an alert for that as well. Under network scanners, we could turn on a threat scanner, and what that does, it auto scans clients connected to your network to identify potential security threats and vulnerabilities, and we'll turn that on. And we could also install an internal honeypot. When you turn this on, it's going to apply a honeypot to your networks, which will specify which network to detect malware, worms, and other type of malicious traffic. So I will set that on for now, and then we're going to create a honeypot. And we're going to want to create this honeypot under the 192.168.10 network. And I'm going to set that to 192.168.10.49 as the beginning range is all my devices. And we'll press create. And now you can see that there's been a honeypot made, and you could do multiple for each network. And then we'll press apply changes. And the last thing I'll show you is content filtering. So if we want to make a network family safe, we could do that. So we'll go to networks, and if we want this content filter to apply to my Mac Telecom guest, we're going to go to edit, and then we're going to select content filtering. Under the content filtering, it has 3 different categories. It has none, which will allow all sites. It has work, which blocks explicit, pornographic, and malicious domains, search engines, and YouTube set to safe mode. The family one will block VPNs, pornographic, and malicious domains. And then the search engines and YouTube are set to safe mode. We'll put it to family, and we'll press apply. So that was a complete setup of a Unifi network, which included creating networks, Wi-Fi networks, firewall rules, network cameras, and installing threat management. If you guys like this video, please hit the thumbs up button. If you're new here, please subscribe and hit the bell icon. All right, thanks.